Some people imagine one electric eye is just as good as the next, until they look into this one. So said Canon in a 1961 advert when they launched the Canonet. It is apparently a lot easier, not to mention cheaper, to put the electric eye in a rectangle somewhere on the camera body. Canon, however, declared that inadequate for them and for the consumer, so they wrapped the electric eye around the lens. The electric eye, of course, being the selenium cell. We've seen the same form factor before on the Olympus Trip 35, so now we know who did it first. Canon's intention was to create a low-cost but good quality camera for the masses. They appear to have been successful. Apparently, they sold out in 2 hours when it first launched in Tokyo. While that obviously depends on how many copies they had in stock at the time in the first place, I have to admit that sounds rather impressive. Let's take a look at this camera to find out why this thing was so popular. The key feature is the selenium cell light meter. Not the fact that it's got one, but the way it was implemented. It is wrapped around the front of the lens. According to Canon, it means the cells perceive light the same way as the camera does. Hence, this is more accurate than other type of on-camera light meters. It's also very clever. While not being through the lens per se, it does automatically compensate for filters. The lens itself is a 45mm f1.9, which is relatively fast. Ranging from f16 to f1.9, it also has an auto setting, which when selected turns this camera into a shutter priority shooter. The shutter speed selector is located on the lens also. It is the foremost ring and has the settings from bulb to 500 in the usual steps. The third ring on the lens is the focusing ring, which operates the rangefinder mechanism. There is a very handy focus lever on the ring to make it easier to use. There are also focus distance guide numbers on the ring too if you need. On the bottom of the lens is where you can select the ASA ISO of the film. There are also 3 lighting guide icons on the bottom of the lens: sunny, cloudy, and indoors. Right next to that is a cell timer lever, which gives you about 6 to 7 seconds. The Canonet takes a standard 35mm film and is loaded at the back of the camera. The back is opened by depressing the button next to the tripod socket underneath the camera and moving the small lever on that socket. The original Canonet did not feature the film quick load system, which was introduced in the later versions of the Canonets. The film is advanced via the film advance crank, which is at the bottom of the camera, unlike most other rangefinders. The shutter button is in the usual place at the top of the camera, however. It's a strange arrangement, but it does give the camera a clean, streamlined kind of look. The only other things at the top of the camera are the hot shoe and the frame counter window. The flash mounted on the hot shoe can be synced via the sync socket next to the lens. There is a lever on the lens which you can use to switch from M, manual mode, to X sync mode. Once the film is used up, it can be rewound by first moving the rewind lever at the bottom of the camera to the hour position, and then winding the camera with the rewind crank, also at the bottom of the camera. Composing with a Canonet is a great experience. This model is a slightly later version of the original, so it comes with aperture scale viewable in the viewfinder. The absolute original didn't. There are frame lines, but I don't believe these account for parallax, so be careful. So that's it. It's an easy to use yet good quality camera. It has a good fast lens, comfortable viewfinder, good looks, and shutter priority auto exposure without the need for batteries. It's easy to see why this was a home run for Canon back in the day. For me, I found the camera a little bit awkward at first. My main issue with this camera is the location of the film advance lever at the bottom of the camera. I had to fight against muscle memory, and that's never a good idea with photography. I found it kind of got in the way. However, I found the exposure meter to be excellent as promised. In this day and age though, that depends heavily on finding a copy where the selenium cell hasn't degraded. I was lucky. The photos came out looking roughly the same as I'm used to with my other rangefinders from that era. In my opinion though, the Zuiko lenses from Olympus are a little bit better. Even though this isn't quite the cult camera, That's the later Canonet QL17G3. It has still benefited from the boost of the Canonet name. Hence, you'd probably find it on eBay for a little bit more than it's worth. And while I did manage to get good photos from mine, it's a little bit far down the list of cameras I'd pick up to go shooting with. Now, if I had the QL17, that would be a different story. Until next time, 再见!